They say a child cannot choose their father, but a mother definitely can. In this case, that choice made all the difference. Jesse McFadden, a convicted rapist with a long history of sexual crimes, was given the chance to become a father figure to 3 teenagers. However, on the day he was supposed to appear in court, he didn't show up. Instead, the police discovered 7 bodies at his home. All were shot in the head, and 2 of them had been sexually assaulted. The big question is, how could this tragedy have happened? You'll decide for yourself by the end of this video. And brace yourself, because this is a case you won't forget. To start with, this happened about a year ago in Henryetta, Oklahoma, and it all began with Holly McFadden. She was a stunning 35-year-old mother of 3 teenagers, and she had 2 daughters, Tiffany Guess, who was just 13, and Riley Allen, 17. She also had a son, Michael Mayo, who was 15. The children had different biological fathers, but they all called Tiffany's father Joe, their dad. Joe wasn't just a figure in their lives, he was their rock. He and Holly had been married for 13 years before their divorce, and he'd been a constant in Riley's life since she was only a year old. Even after the marriage ended, Joe's love for the children never wavered. He cared for them like they were his own. He even wanted to adopt Michael and Riley. But then, everything changed. On May 26, 2022, Holly remarried. She tied the knot with a man named Jesse McFadden, and this, tragically, is where their story took a dark and unexpected turn. From the outside, their life looked like a fairy tale, a happy marriage and a blended family getting along perfectly. But no one was ready for the horrifying truth about Jesse that would come to light just a year after they married. At this point, it's unclear whether Holly knew about his past before their marriage. What we do know is that her mother found out about Jesse's troubling history months before the tragedy. We'll dive into those details soon. As for Jesse McFadden, he was born in Kansas and dropped out of school after 9th grade. He was living in McAllister when he first ran into legal trouble for underage beer possession. In 2002, he admitted to stealing over $80,000 from his grandfather and pleaded guilty to a felony charge of grand larceny. The following year, he was caught twice for driving with a suspended license. And in that same year, Jesse was charged and arrested for attacking a 17-year-old girl at knife point with very sexual motives. He was convicted of this crime and sentenced to 20 years in prison. And while in prison, Jesse got caught with a cell phone for the first time in 2013. A woman had reported that he'd been texting her with sexual messages for 3 months. In 2016, Jesse was caught with a cell phone again. When officers confiscated the phone, they discovered explicit conversations, videos, and photos involving a 16-year-old girl named Caitlin. It was Caitlin's grandfather who had reported their interactions to prison officials. According to an affidavit from a Department of Corrections investigator, Jesse was accused of sending graphic content to Caitlin and engaging in manipulative behavior. Despite being required to serve 85% of his sentence, Jesse's time in prison was marked by outstanding evaluations for work and education, which initially made him eligible for early release. However, his contraband cell phone incident led to a temporary loss of this privilege before he was eventually released in October 2020. Now, the question is, how did someone with such a messed up past get early release when they were caught doing the same things that put them in prison in the first place? It's baffling why he wasn't kept in jail until his trial, especially since getting caught with that cell phone should have stopped him from getting out early. Not stopping there, after his release, Jesse was supposed to check in with the sheriff's office every 90 days, but he didn't stick to the rules. Normally, people like him aren't allowed near places where kids hang out, like schools and sports events. But he completely ignored those rules. Now, remember when we mentioned earlier that Jesse was accused again after sexting with Caitlin? Well, the trial for that case was delayed by several years. It was because of this delay that Jesse got married and even had the opportunity to work and act as a stepfather to Holly's 3 children. It wasn't until May 1st, 2023, that the trial would finally begin. Jesse planned to argue in court that he was only communicating with a 20-year-old friend of the 16-year-old girl, not the girl herself. Initially, Joe and Holly had a strict rule. Anyone around their kids had to pass a background check. Holly assured Joe that Jesse's check was clear before the trial on May 1st. Now, it's a mystery whether Holly didn't notice his shady behavior or simply chose to ignore it. What really happened is anyone's guess. Meanwhile, while they waited for the trial, a series of deadly events unfolded. In the final weekend of April 2023, Ivy Webster and Brittany Brewer, along with a few other girls who chose not to join, were invited to spend time at Tiffany's house, where Jesse McFadden was also staying. The weekend was meant for fun and typical teenage activities. On Saturday around noon, Jesse McFadden picked up Brittany. The plan was to take the girls shopping at the mall and then to Main Event, a popular family entertainment center in Tulsa. Ivy kept her mom, Ashley Webster, updated through Snapchat throughout the night. But the next morning, something was off. Ivy and Brittany's parents received texts from their daughters saying they were heading to McFadden's family property in McAllister, and by Monday, the situation grew even more concerning. None of the kids, Brittany, Ivy, Tiffany, Michael, or Riley, were on the school bus in the morning, which drove right past their homes. Worried and alarmed, the parents reported the kids as missing to the police. Meanwhile, Jesse McFadden was supposed to appear in court that same Monday for his trial, but he never showed up. Officers stood outside his property, waiting for a warrant. When they finally obtained one, they were unprepared for the horrifying discovery they would find. 7 bodies were discovered scattered across Jesse McFadden's property. The initial shock of finding Jesse himself among the dead was just the beginning. As authorities began piecing together the identities of the victims, it became clear that the other 6 were just as tragic. Jesse's wife Holly, her 3 children, Tiffany, Michael, and Riley, and Ivy and Brittany, 2 close friends of the family. All 7 had been brutally shot in the head with a 9mm pistol, a grim detail that painted a picture of cold-blooded violence.
Holly McFadden suffered 3 gunshot wounds to the head, and Jesse McFadden appears to have shot himself in the head.
The bodies were spread out in 2 separate locations on the sprawling land. Ivy, Brittany, and Riley were found about a quarter mile from the house, while the other 4 victims were discovered in a dense, wooded area. The separation of the bodies suggested a sinister scenario. They might have been killed in different spots and then moved, or they could have been fleeing from their killer. And it didn't take long for investigators to uncover the tragic truth. Jesse had first used the gun on his wife, her children, and their friends, before finally taking his own life. The motive behind these horrific killings remains a mystery, but there are unsettling clues. As we mentioned earlier, Jesse was supposed to start his trial on the very morning the bodies were discovered. It's chilling to think that he might have committed these crimes to keep his dark secrets buried and prevent his family from learning the horrifying details of his actions. The night before the trial, text messages revealed just how disturbed Jesse's mind really was. Caitlin shared that she received unsettling messages from him the evening before the trial. As she was preparing for her important day in court in Oklahoma, she noticed a Facebook message request from Jesse McFadden around 8 p.m. In those messages, Jesse seemed to blame her for not dropping the charges, expressing frustration that his life was falling apart because of her. He wrote, "I did exactly what I promised I would do when I got out. I got a marketing job, made great money, and was advancing. I've been here 2 years now, built a great life like I promised with you. This is all on you for continuing this." In another message, he added, "Now it's all gone. I told you I wouldn't go back." These messages reveal a man desperate to avoid returning to prison and angry that his secrets were about to be exposed. At first, Caitlin assumed McFadden might be blaming her for some personal setback. Maybe he had lost a job. The message also hinted that McFadden no longer cared about the conditions of his bail, as contacting her was a clear violation of the rules. Not wanting to get involved, Caitlin chose to ignore the message. Instead, she took a screenshot and sent it to Edwards, the Muskogee County District Attorney, as a precaution. The next morning, Caitlin received a call from the prosecutor with some unsettling news. The trial had been delayed again because McFadden's lawyer had requested more time due to an issue with McFadden's phone. Then, just half an hour later, Caitlin got another urgent call from the prosecutor. She was informed that there was a missing persons report involving McFadden, Brittany Brewer, and Ivy Webster. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Caitlin packed a bag in a hurry and rented an Airbnb just 45 minutes away, thinking he would come for her. Crystal Smith, one of Jesse's earlier victims, also spoke out about her traumatic experience and the anguish of learning about the killings. She had pleaded with the district attorney not to release Jesse, fearing he would harm others. Crystal shared that the last time she heard from anyone about Jesse was when she was 17. She was told that he was high on meth and sorry for his actions. Despite her attempts to move on, hearing about the tragedy brought back gut-wrenching feelings. In her interview, Crystal revealed the terror she faced when she was attacked by Jesse at 16. She had been at a party in McAllister and left her truck behind. Jesse showed up at her home, claiming that his wife had kicked him out and he needed a place to stay. Despite her attempts to send him away, Jesse forced his way in, gagged her with a sock, tied her to her bed, and subjected her to horrific abuse. In the days following the discovery of the bodies, Caitlin Babb has been overwhelmed by a whirlwind of emotions. She's felt a crushing mix of guilt, anger, frustration, and deep grief.
I mean, I feel horrible. It makes you feel terrible, like you're not even human.
Babb says her case was set to start trial on Monday.
I was prepared and I was ready. I've been ready for 6 years.
But McFadden was a no-show and the gruesome news broke.
It was terrible. Especially when it's something that could have been prevented and it never should have happened.
When it came to Ivy and Brittany's parents, they were shocked by Jesse's past. They had no idea about his criminal history. They thought the weekend sleepover was just a normal event. Nathan Brewer, Brittany's dad, described Jesse as a nice guy. Ivy's mom, Ashley Webster, said their families had been friends since late 2020 and that she was unaware of Jesse's background. She described Tiffany and Ivy as best friends and mentioned that Tiffany was like another child to their family. Holly's mother, Jeanette Mayo, also expressed her shock. She revealed that her daughter was deceived by Jesse McFadden's charm. Jeanette noticed that Jesse exerted tight control over Holly, dictating where she could go, whom she could see, and even tracking the kids' cell phones when they were out. Jesse was distant and reserved around Jeanette and her husband, which only added to their confusion. They were actually the first to discover Jesse's criminal record because months before the murders, Jeanette's husband was researching a co-worker's criminal history when they stumbled upon Jesse's past. Jeanette and her husband confronted Holly about what they found, and Holly eventually asked Jesse for an explanation. Jesse, with his twisted mind, reportedly hired someone to convince Holly that his previous legal troubles were a misunderstanding and that he had not harmed anyone back in 2003. Despite this, Holly's assurance that Jesse had passed a background check raised significant concerns.
I was probably the most outspoken family member about Jesse being a registered sex offender. And I would say, do this, Jan, say this. And anytime we tried to approach the situation, she was punished. She was shut down. She was constantly on eggshells. She wouldn't be able to talk to her children. So she had to keep a balance. She had to accept things if she wanted to keep an eye on the grandkids and talk to her daughter.
A few days after the tragic murders, the victims' families and a sheriff's investigator were allowed to visit the house where their loved ones spent their final days. What they found inside was shocking. Multiple beds were equipped with restraints and chains locked into place. In the kitchen, an island had a chain and lock attached to it. The house was littered with disturbing items: bondage toys, restraining devices, lubrication bottles, and witchcraft-related books. Drug paraphernalia was scattered throughout, including what appeared to be drugged candy. The investigators collected a trove of evidence from the scene: computers, cell phones, dirty bed sheets, and other disturbing materials. Among the evidence, one of the families discovered their daughter's cell phone, along with several other devices, multiple computers, and 2 laptops. They also uncovered a bloody wet wipe, 5 more phones, and even more disturbing items hidden in the closet.
Cell phones, laptops, sex and bondage devices. In 2 weeks, officials have collected at least 2 hard drives, 9 cell phones, palm and fingerprints from McFadden's truck, and various purchase receipts. The storage unit under McFadden's wife's name has also been searched.
When they called the police to report this, they shockingly told them to leave the property. Then, a notebook came to light, filled with names, including the 6 people Jesse had murdered. Given what was found in that house, many people can't help but wonder if Holly knew about Jesse's twisted actions. The condition of the house was beyond disgusting, a clear sign that something terrible had been happening for a long time. It's shocking how all this evidence was overlooked, possibly due to sheer negligence from law enforcement. Letting the family into the crime scene before it was fully cleared is unbelievable. And that notebook, it's chilling to think Jesse might have done this before, with everything carefully planned. In an emotional interview, Ivy's parents shared their belief that Jesse impersonated their daughter in a text they received on Sunday, after he had already killed her. Ivy's mom, Ashley, shared that she had been texting with Ivy late Saturday night, but the message she received the next morning felt off. The text said Ivy was going to McAllister and would be home later, but now they think Jesse sent that message, and Ivy was likely already gone when it was sent. Ashley described Ivy as a wonderful kid who loved animals, people, and playing softball. Ivy was known for her big heart and the way she cared for everyone around her. But more than anything, Ivy was Ashley's best friend. She was always thoughtful in her texts, messaging before and after most things, and never forgetting to say, "I love you." So, when Ivy texted about going swimming in McAllister and the specific wording she used, it felt different, but Ashley brushed it off, thinking Ivy was just in a rush. Ivy's parents also mentioned that they found Jesse a bit odd, but since Ivy's friends often hung out at his house, they felt it was safe for her to go there too. Additionally, Tiffany often visited their home, even staying over on weekends, and they never noticed anything strange during those times. Jesse had everyone fooled, making them believe he was a great guy, a loving husband, and a caring father figure. Brittany's father, Nathan, fought back tears as he spoke about his daughter, her outgoing personality, and her dreams of becoming a teacher or a vet. Brittany was also selected to be Miss July in a local pageant, part of the Miss National pageant in Tulsa. Both she and her loved ones were excited about it, and her dad is heartbroken that she won't be able to experience that or anything else. Jeanette, who tragically lost 4 family members, spoke out about her daughter and grandchildren. She described Holly as a fantastic mother who was overprotective and loved her children more than anything. As for Jesse, he didn't deserve an easy way out. His actions demanded far more than just a quick end. He needed to face true justice and suffering for what he did. Even those who knew him in prison have come forward, shedding light on just how twisted he was. James Fleming, who shared a cell with McFadden at Joseph Harp Correctional Center in 2015, described him as a very sexual person, noting that their conversations frequently took unsettling and inappropriate turns. He talked about sex all the time, Fleming said. It wasn't just occasionally, it was constant. And I told someone recently, if I hadn't been strong mentally and physically, I believe he would have tried to molest me. Fleming also shared how learning about McFadden's past changed his perception. When you find out something like that, it just shifts everything you think about a person because it's so horrific. He tried to justify his actions, but I knew better. You don't get a 20-year sentence for statutory rape if you're 18 and the girl is 17 and her parents just got upset. It's much worse than that.
Locked up with a dangerous man.
We were cellmates for about 16 months, maybe a little bit longer than that.
While James Fleming was serving time for burglary, he met Jesse McFadden, who we've told you police say killed 5 children, his wife, and himself.
His weird sexual predatorness just like came out of him. Like everything that we talked about it always led to like a sexual comment or innuendo.
And knowing that the two friends were molested before their deaths has left many people questioning how someone like Jesse McFadden could slip through the cracks, despite his past and the red flags. Why were the signs ignored, and how did the system fail so many innocent lives? Even though Jesse McFadden tried to reinvent himself by marrying Holly and playing the role of a good dad for a while, the disturbing items found in their home, like hand restraints, sex toys, and explicit books, were huge warning signs. It's clear that Holly might have been manipulated into thinking all this was normal. So when you meet new people, keep this case in mind. You can't always judge someone instantly, and you never know what secrets they might be hiding. The world is a vast place, so stay aware. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe and check out our other true crime stories. Take care and see you in the next one.